Okay, good evening, everyone. Buenas tardes. Welcome to the virtual Ossining Public Library and the virtual Greenburgh Public Library. We're very excited to have you here. I'm Diana Lennon, Head of Adult Services.
My name is Antonio Forte. I am Library Assistant in Adult Services at Greenburgh Library.
And we are really happy to be celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month with this presentation about Latin music. And Tony will introduce David, our speaker.
Welcome to Latin Music 101. Tonight we have a real treat for everyone. We have David DeJesus. He is a SUNY Purchase professor of music. And tonight he's going to discuss many different forms of Latin music in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. From salsa to bachata, reggaeton, Latin music. We're going to learn all kinds of musical history, current trends, and listen to some samples of all kinds of Latin music. A little bit of background for David. He is an alto saxophonist and has been in the New York City jazz scene since the late 90s and has established himself as a key player in numerous bands in various genres. In Latin jazz and salsa, David has shared the stage with Rubén Blades, Larry Harlow, Gilberto Santa Rosa, Tito Rodriguez Jr. He's currently a member of a Grammy Award-winning Arturo O'Farrill Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra and the Grammy-nominated Bobby Sanabria Big Band and the legendary Ron Carter's Great Big Band. So without further ado, Professor, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Looking forward to today. So my name is David DeJesus. I am a New Yorican. That means I was born to Puerto Rican parents. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. My parents are from Puerto Rico. My father's from Ponce, and my mother is from Humacao. I was brought up in a assimilation environment. My parents wanted me to really assimilate to American culture to the point where they didn't teach me Spanish. They purposely didn't want me to get an accent. They both had thick accents, and they didn't want me to have problems with their jobs. In the job market. But I grew up in Brooklyn, in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and my family owned 2 bodegas. We lived on the same block in Central Avenue and Star in Brooklyn. My dad's number 13, so it was a lot of family members in the same block. We owned a bodega in each corner, a laundromat in the middle, and a dry cleaners. And in each of those places, music was playing. And just by being in the environment, I accidentally heard Tito Puente and Tito Rodriguez and Gilberto Santa Rosa. And when I got the opportunity, I became a musician. I got the opportunity to start working with these people. I had a big leg up just from having that in the air. I was already ahead of the game. And my last name is DeJesus, and I found myself playing with a lot of Latin jazz ensembles and salsa ensembles and such, but I didn't really know what I was a part of. I knew my parts. I was a saxophonist, so I knew how to play my part, but I wasn't exactly aware of what I was a part of. Was I playing mambo? Was I in cha-cha? Was I doing Mozambique? I had no idea. So I decided at one point that my name's never going to change to Smith or something. I'm going to be a DeJesus forever, so I should know more about this music. So I started studying the percussion, and the first instrument I studied was called the bongo. I have some instruments I'm going to play you to show you the sounds that you're hearing. The bongo, I'll actually show you right now. This is the bongo over here. And I used to think that this instrument was like a secondary instrument in the ensemble. I thought the conga was the leader of the rhythm section. I found out that the bongocero is actually the leader of the rhythm section. So the bongos, you've heard the sound before. So we'll get into all of that. But I started on the bongo. I studied a year of each instrument. So I did a year of bongo, I did a year of congas, I did a year of timbales, and I still study. I like studying new instruments because it reminds me of what it's like to be a student again. When you get to a certain level, like where I am on certain instruments, it's easy to forget how hard it is to learn. So So I want to take you along my journey through this music, and give you some backstory to where this all came from. So one of the first bands I worked with was by the name of Ray Vega. He's a trumpet player from New York City. He was playing lead trumpet with Tito Puente's band, and he was playing trumpet with Mongo Santa Maria. So he was right in the thick of it. He was also working with Ray Barreto. And he had a small group. He taught at Purchase College when I was there. He came my junior year, and he wanted me to join one of his ensembles, and I couldn't because I had some core class at the same time. And he was like, "Oh, well, you should come to my gig. I play every Wednesday in the city." So I came, and I built a relationship with him, and fate would have it that I ended up joining his band about 3 months later. And through him, I met. I got like kind of a little deeper into the music. And I eventually met a gentleman by the name of Bobby Sanabria. So Bobby Sanabria is a very active percussionist, and he's a hero of Puerto Rican music. He's trying to keep Puerto Rican music alive. A lot of Latin music is considered to be Afro-Cuban, but there's a lot of other cultures that are contributing their own music that are maybe came from Cuba but has flourished on its own. So we're going to get into that. So Bobby introduced me to more specifics of the music of Puerto Rico, and in particular, there was a guy that used to hang around Bobby Sanabria named Ned Sablé. And Ned was a scholar, an ethnomusicologist, and he wrote this book that I highly recommend. It's called Cuba and Its Music. So I got the book and I read it, and I was fortunate to be able to talk with Ned about the book, and I learned so much. Ned's argument is Afro-Cuban. We may have heard this term before, right? But it's a very vague term. So Afro means Africa, coming from Africa. Africa is it's the source of many things. We have, the West Congo is very different from Egypt, which is part of Africa, right? And Morocco, and all the way down to South Africa. It's the largest continent as far as different groups of civilization goes, and it's the birthplace of many things. So Afro is already very vague, and then Spain is the other, right? So when you think Cuba, you think of Spain. Spain was conquered by everybody. So if you go to northern Spain, that music, like from Galicia, sounds like Irish jig music. And there's bagpipes in that music. And then you go further south and it sounds Middle Eastern because of their influence. So he breaks down that in order to really learn about the music of Cuba, you have to get deep into the music of Africa and then all of the people that conquered Spain. So we're not going to get into that too much right now, but I want to kind of hit the cliff notes of this. So in regards to Africa, there's a tribe called the Yoruba tribe. Yoruba, Yoruba. And they were on the west coast of Nigeria, which is unfortunately where a bulk of the slave trade was drawing its slaves from. So there was a thing called the trade winds. So there's a reason why we end up in certain spots. So there's a certain part of Africa that had strong winds that was able to bring ships to the Caribbean. The first place they would pass is Puerto Rico. Then they would pass by Hispaniola, which we now know as Dominican Republic and Haiti. And then Cuba was next. So the Spanish-American War, for example, the United States decided that they wanted Puerto Rico because that was the first island in regards to the trade winds. But they regretted that decision later because they would much rather have had Cuba. But they ended up having Puerto Rico. So the Yoruba tribe, they were on the west coast of Africa in Nigeria, and they're a very special tribe. Music is a huge part of their culture. They ended up coming to the New World, to the West Indies at the time, through the slave trade, and they adapted their culture into a thing called Santeria. And in Santeria, there's a saint. Every saint has a rhythm. So it's a very organized, specific religion, and and music is at its core for sure. And it's because of these people that we have the diversity of music that we have in Latin America. I'm going to play a couple of little samples of their music so you can hear that it's not far off from what we know now. So this is some Yoruba music here. Can you hear this? Let me see. So even there, you can hear so many things. You hear a little bit of cumbia in there. You hear clave. So in there you hear. You hear, and it's kind of a mix of everything. So when they came to the New World, and they started working their way, not by choice, through South America into Colombia and Peru and Chile, they brought along their favorite rhythm and were able to really grow it into its own new genre. Let's listen to a couple other things. So this is just samples of Yoruba music here. Let's try over here. They pioneered this concept of call and response that is like a defining characteristic of a lot of music, where you'll have a main singer singing and the chorus will join in, either repeating the phrase or answering the question. Sometimes the leader is asking a question and then the group will answer the question. So that tradition started with the Yoruba. Let me play you another little sample over here. Oh, sorry. Okay, here we go. Over here.
Èṣù àṣekòkò tó lájà wọlé. Ọ̀nà ẹ̀kúnrẹ́ èwo ló máa bá jáde. Èṣù àṣekòkò tó lájà wọlé o. Ọ̀nà ẹ̀kúnrẹ́ èwo ló máa bá jáde.
Beautiful music, and it's all those pitches that you're hearing, those are actually drums. So they didn't have every culture has what I call a mother instrument. So we live in the United States of America. We're considered part of Western music. So Western music is Eastern Europe over. Our mother instrument is the piano. We've divided an octave into 12 notes of the piano, and that's how we have composed our music. Japan has a different mother instrument. It's the koto, which is, it divides the octave in a different way. You have India has the sitar. There's a lot of different mother instruments, and your mother instrument defines your harmony. So Africa, their mother instrument was the drums, and they weren't limited to specific pitches, because drums can be tuned infinitely. So there's no limit to where a drum can sit. But they found really great pitches that worked with each other, and we can actually play this music in our Western world. It's amazing, actually. Like, there's music from India that you can't play on Western instruments, because we just don't have those notes. So so we have all these notes. So this is the Yoruba tribe. So they came to Cuba. Why do we talk about Cuba so much? Well, so Spain used Cuba as its pride and joy. Spain developed Cuba heavily and would bring other countries out to Cuba to sort of show off how great Spain was. And so a lot of cultures mixed in Cuba. So the French came out, and the French introduced this concept of the contradance, which they didn't call the contradance. They called it was just formal line dancing. But it was like the hot thing to do back in the 1500s, was to have line dancing, where all the eligible females would line up against the eligible males, and they would spend the first part of this dance trying to find a partner. So I'll play you a little example of how this sounds. This is a contradance from Cuba. So it almost sounded, before the percussion came in, it almost sounded like traditional classical music, right? So, and that's because its origins were there. So when countries would come to Cuba, they would bring their best chamber ensembles and their best orchestras out, and the native people got to discover these instruments. That's why we see violin in charanga groups. That's because the orchestras came to Cuba, and we see clarinet in a lot of Colombian music. That started in Cuba, and it worked its way also to Brazil. So these classical instruments, the guitar is another one. Guitar is a huge part of Cuban son music, which I'll play a little bit for you. So it all started in Cuba. Cuba was this melting pot of this music. So funny thing about the contradanza, I'm going to play you something now. This is, I'll start it a little into the song. I'm going to send you this playlist so you can listen to some of these things that I put together. But the way so the contradanza led to what you're going to hear now is the danzón, the Cuban danzón. And the danzón is the most formal, most organized of the Cuban musics, of the original Cuban music. And the format is, there's an introduction, there's the main song, and then it leads into the cha-cha section, which is a more upbeat, more festive part of the song. And that's how the song finishes. And the chain of events is the intro starts, you're finding your part, the lines are forming for the eligible dancers. Then the main part of the danzón happens, and that's where the dancers are trying to find which partner they're going to end up doing the cha-cha with. And the cha-cha is the party where you're celebrating. So let me play it for you now. You'll hear when it transitions. I'll start a little deeper into the song. Really beautiful music. I love danzons. But it's very organized. This does not sound like street music. This is very organized, formal music that took place in dance halls. I'll zoom forward a little bit more. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Here's our cha-cha. So, isn't that gorgeous? And I just love the whole story of it all. So what ended up later happening when we get to Mambo in New York, right? Because Mambo, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but Mambo is a New York creation inspired by Cubans, really created by Puerto Ricans in New York. This has to do with the embargo. So Cubans and Puerto Ricans ended up in New York, especially musicians, because that's where the recording studios were. They were all in New York. And then the embargo happened. All the Cubans had to go back to Cuba, and the Puerto Ricans were allowed to stay because they were US citizens, and they kept the music going and evolved it into the mambo. But the cha-cha, what ends up happening is young people, especially young musicians and composers, are like, man, I don't want to wait 5 minutes to get to the cha-cha. I just want to start on the cha-cha. And that's how the cha-cha-cha started as its own genre. And mambo, that concept of the dance music just starting right out of the gate as a dance. And it's funny how music comes in cycles, because we've got salsa romantica with all of these salseros that like Gilberto Santa Rosa and such, and they did the opposite. They wanted to bring back these long intros that eventually led into the dance section. So they're kind of honoring tradition that way. So that's the danzón. The danzón is the most formal of the music from Cuba. Now let's go to the opposite. So something to understand about Cuba and Spain and slavery is the Spaniards treated the slaves very differently than the British treated their slaves. So the British did not allow the slaves to keep their instruments. That is why in the United States, at least, we have developed a strong vocal tradition. That's why we have all these great Black African American singers. It comes from, they weren't allowed to have percussion, and they developed their vocal tradition. In Cuba, the Spaniards allowed the slaves to keep their instruments. You were even allowed to marry a slave. It went that far. You were allowed to socialize with slaves in public, and you were allowed to marry a slave. But there was just an understanding that one was not a slave and one was a slave. Not to say that they had it good by any means, but it was a different interaction. Now, occasionally there would be strikes. The Spaniards would kind of try to put their foot down and go, you can't have your instruments, but it wouldn't last that long, because the Cubans at this time were so creative that they would make an instrument out of everything. So let me we'll kind of bounce around a little bit. So let me show you some of these instruments that we're dealing with as Cuban instruments. So these here are clave. Now, they're called clave because they play a rhythm called clave. And I'd like you to try this with me. You're all on mute, so no one will know that you messed up or not. But there's a few types of clave. So, and they all kind of they're considered 2/3 or 3/2. So 2/3 means that there's a group of 2 and a group of 3. So it goes like this. 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2. Try clapping that if you can. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's the groove that's underlying this music. It comes from the Yoruba people. It actually comes from a rhythm called senkio with five beat rhythm. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It comes from that. And they slowed it down, and they use it in song form. Another version of it is backwards. So 3/2 clave. So instead of starting with the 2, you start with the 3. So it sounds like this. 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So it doesn't seem like much, but what that does is that changes our accents of other things that are going on. That brings us to the cowbell. So the cowbell is it was a cowbell. And Cubans were so creative that a cowbell fell off a cow, and someone said, that I can make a song with that. It's amazing. These are amazing people. I want to just state, we're being recorded. The music of Latin America is the music of resilience and perseverance. It's amazing the beautiful music these people made under such horrible conditions. But it's just amazing. So this is a cowbell, and they're different kinds, and they have names depending on what patterns they play. So this one here is called a bongo bell because the bongocero plays it, and it plays the bongo pattern. You can play any pattern you want on it, though. So the bongo bell pattern typically, let me show you a couple things. So you hit it with a stick, and there are many different sounds. So we've got, let me back up a little bit. Okay, so we've got right here is a certain sound. The side, right, has a brighter sound, and then this open. So we can put things, and also I use my fingers on the back to give a different beat. So check this out. So here's a bongo pattern. I can do a little faster. I can do, let's see, I could do different meters. So. So it's so many things you could do with this thing. That's why the bongo, if you notice, it's very punchy. It cuts right through, right? That's why the bongo seto is the leader of the rhythm section. He determines when it's mellow on the bongo, and then when it goes to the bell, and that's more driving. So he determines those transitions that happen. Okay, so next we get an instrument that I don't have here, but you may have heard and seen, the timbales. Okay, the timbales, the story with that instrument is these orchestras were coming to Cuba, and you may not know this, but the timpani player in an orchestra is considered the boss of the percussion section. So the trumpet is the boss of the brass section. The oboe is the boss of the woodwind section, like flutes and clarinets and such. Violin is the boss of the string section. And the timpani player is the boss of the percussion section. So the natives, the Cubans, fell in love with the timpani because of how they carry themselves, and it in the hands of a right person, it's a really amazing instrument. How you can change the pitches and the sound that you get. So they tried to replicate that. So the first what they did was they used sugar bowls. So Cuba, the reason why Spain was so invested in Cuba for so long is sugar. At one point, Cuba was providing 80% of the sugar that the United States was getting. And and globally, they were contributing a fifth of sugar production was all coming from Cuba. So that was big money. So sugar was a huge part of the culture. So these sugar bowls, they tried to use, but sugar bowls are still very heavy and they're not very portable. Right? And why was portability an issue? Well, one was these occasional strikes would happen on instruments, so they would have to be able to hide their instrument like pretty quickly. You can't hide a timpani really quickly. So they needed, and also they would do gigs out in in the jungle, and they needed to have easy way to transport these things. So they moved to sugar bowls. They eventually found the sweet spot with oil barrels. So they would cut the top of an oil barrel off, and that's how they made the first timbales. Pretty fascinating. Now, speaking of miniaturization, that brings me to the bongo. So here's the bongo over here. And the bongo is meant to be a portable version of the congas. So you can take this anywhere. Like I have it in my hands, and I can easily chuck this under my bed. And this instrument, when tuned really low, can sound like a conga. Let me compare really quickly. So here's the congas here, and we're gonna get to this. These are very important instruments. But I'll play a pattern on the congas, and then I'll play it on the bongo. Okay, so. So now I go to the bongo, and I'll try to do a similar thing here. So you got 80% of the sound with portability, right? It's like having an inflatable kayak versus a big old kayak you got to store somewhere, right? It's not going to be as fast, but you can store it in your closet, right? So a lot of these Cuban instruments are from miniaturization because they needed to be portable. So another one that I have here is the huilo. This is a very important instrument. So it's a gourd. It's a hollowed out gourd. And sometimes they cut the top off, but I like to keep my top on. And there's a few ways you play this. So let me stand up here. So you can hit it. So you can get, right? We can also play rhythms like, so we scrape. And we can scrape up too. Now, if you're skilled enough, you can do something like this. So, which is part of the cha cha cha, cha 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 cha. So, this instrument was a key instrument in the danzón. So the danzón would have the timbales and the huilo as the main instruments. And then other genres such as son and rumba kind of got involved with them as well. So those are basically the main instruments of Cuba. But then we get these guys, the congas. Now, I mentioned that danzón is the most formal, right, of the genres. So going the other way, we have the rumba. So now the rumba was developed on the docks. So I mentioned that Spaniards were allowed to fraternize with slaves and even marry slaves, but there was still a hierarchy of skin tone. So the darker you were, the less likely you were to assimilate into society. It's sort of like with actors, right? For a while, Black actors that were successful were Will Smith, Sanaa Lathan, like lighter-skinned actors. And now we're seeing a revival of very dark leading role figures, which is wonderful. But in Cuba, basically, the lighter skin you were, the more likely you were to marry a Spaniard. And then their offspring would be the mulattoes, which were the lighter-skinned people, and that became the culture of higher society in Cuba. If you were very dark skinned, you were relegated to more physical labor type jobs, and a lot of that was working on the docks. So let's get back to the clave for a second. The story of the clave is this. All these ships, the slave triangle was from Europe down to Africa to the New World back to Europe, correct? Now, these ships took a beating, they took a pounding, and every time they got to a location, they would repair things. They would have to fix things. So when they made the first trip from Europe down to Africa, they would use the African wood there to fix things. Now, something of note is in shipbuilding, they don't use metal, they don't use nails for a few reasons. One is metal and seawater don't mix, so they would rot. Right, and they would get rust rather, so that's a problem. You don't want your ship falling apart because all your nails rusted, right? So they would use wooden nails, essentially these wooden pegs, which kind of look like this. Now here's the thing. They made them in Africa, right? Because they would find local trees and make these little pegs and put them together. When they got to Cuba, they would do the same thing. However, they discovered that the trees that they used in Cuba were much better quality. They were a harder wood. They didn't rot like some of the African wood would, and some of the European wood would actually rot. It was very durable, strong wood, and it made a beautiful sound. So the Cuban clave are the best clave to get. I got these in Cuba. I was fortunate enough to go to Cuba in 2012, and I got a bunch of stuff there. I got a Cuban tres. I got a bunch of toys. I'm a music collector, so something to be aware of with this. So it's a cool story is that these came from. So basically, the ship workers that worked on the docks, they would make a bunch of these to repair the ships, and then they would save a couple for themselves for their gigs later. Right? So now that brings me to the congas. So the congas here are, they're an African instrument. This is not a Cuban instrument. So the slaves that worked on the docks had access to carpentry and recreated their instruments. Now, let me show you something really quickly. So, do you see the metal rim on these? Okay, that's a modern invention. We're talking like 1960. This is a modern invention, right? Before this, it was a wooden shell with a skin on top. And the way they would tune the drum is you would bring a candle to the gig, and in between songs you would put the conga on the candle, and the candle would heat up the skin from underneath and tighten the head and bring the pitch back up, because every time you played, the pitch would go down. So they would have these candles. So there's pictures of all these famous bongoceros and even Ray Barreto and stuff like that. They would have candles at the gig to adjust their. So this was a big innovation. This metal rim. So they made these drums, and there's a lot of rhythms we can do with these drums. So, by the way, we call these the congas, but they all have a name actually. So a conga is actually this guy here. And this one here is called a tumbador, which is a bigger drum. And then there's a quinto. They all have a name. There's about, I want to say, 8 different sizes of these things. And in the an original rumba circle, you would see about 9 congueros, each playing their own, each playing their own drum and just one rhythm. And when you see a conga player now, you probably see one guy playing 3 drums. That's a result of finances. That's because it was cheaper to get one guy that can cover 3 parts, and there's less people to pay on the gig. We have Candido to blame to that. Candido Camero, who passed away earlier this year, he played until his late 90s. He was a pioneer he started, he's the first guy to play 2 congas, and then he moved to 3, and he got up to 4 and 5 congas. So he put 4 guys out of work at the same time. So I'll play you a couple things for this. So the rumba has a rhythm. It's called wawanko, is a type of rumba, and it sounds like this. I'll play it for you. So it's at its core, it's got this boom, beam, beam, boom, boom, beam, beam, boom. Now, we remember with rumba, the type of music, it was percussion music. When we heard the earlier recording of the Yoruba recordings, that was just percussion and vocals, and rumba is that. But as we started to integrate these different musics together, this instrument called the bass pops up. I have one in the corner over there. So that boom, beam, beam, bump, that became a bass line, right? So I can play you something really quickly. Let me pull this up for a second. Let's see. Okay. So I'm gonna play a little bass for you, air bass. It pulls up, there we go. Give me a second, sorry. Okay, wonderful. So do we hear this? Cachao, exactly. Yes, I got a funny story about Cachao. So with those orchestras, right? There's a story that an orchestra came to the island, they did a presentation, and the lead, the principal bassist and the principal violinist, hold on, I think, do we have a delay maybe? Let me see. Am I clear? A little bit delay? Okay. Let me try something. I don't want to max my processing power out. You'll hear bass next time when you hear me. Okay. So let's see. Okay. Yeah, we're good. Okay, we're good. So Cachao, so an orchestra comes to the island, and the principal bassist and the principal violinist, they fall in love with the native women. So when the orchestra goes back to Europe, they decide to stay. And how do they pay the bills? They teach the locals how to play violin and bass. That's why there's no cello in charanga music. That's why there's no viola. That's the story. And with Cachao, the story is that the bass player was Cachao's teacher. So Cachao, if you don't know, is that danzón I played you was from Cachao. Cachao is considered the greatest bassist of all time in that genre. Really, of all time in any genre. He was an amazing musician. Yeah, so I thought that was funny. So the conga drums, let me show you how versatile that is. So we have that first rhythm I played you is Wawanko. But then we have a thing called Son Montuno, which has a little more danceable, a little more straight ahead. It sounds like this. Right, now we can change the speed of it. Let me give you a little quick lesson on this for all you aspiring congueros there. The reason we're able to do so many things with this is the many sounds we can get. So we have open. We have what we call a muff, where you mute it. We have a slap. And we have this bass tone, which you probably won't hear on your end, but it's like a boom. So we put these together. So you get a lot of different things out of there. We can use these instruments in Colombian porro. So we can do, let's talk about Puerto Rico. So we have two types of music. There's a lot of music in Puerto Rico, but the two most prominent are bomba and plena. Now, how does Puerto Rico fit into the mix? Well, there was definitely back and forth with Cuba. Puerto Rico was the first stop, actually, from Europe. Right, from Africa and Europe. Just logistically, it's the first island. It's the furthest east, and it was strategically important. We have El Morro, which is the big fort over there, and that was placed there because that was right between. It faces towards Hispaniola over there, and was kind of a way to that plus their navy was how they kind of secured the New World, because something you may not be aware of is that other countries were jealous of Spain, and they enlisted pirates and all sorts of people to rob Spain of its sugar. And Puerto Rico, they found gold, and that's part of why Puerto Rico has the name Puerto Rico, rich port. But it had sugar, it had gold, and just strategically, it was in a good spot. Puerto Rico's actual original name was San Juan, after a religious figure, and the town of San Juan was Puerto Rico. It was a port, but they switched it around because they wanted that particular city. They made that the capital, so they wanted to make they basically swapped them around. So they called San Juan to honor this religious figure, and then they just named the whole island Puerto Rico, because it doesn't make sense that an island is a port if you think about it, right? So so there was definitely, it was a stop along the way to Cuba. So they would stop in Puerto Rico and drop things off and, restock, and then continue on to Cuba, and vice versa on the way back. They would stop by Puerto Rico before they continued on the big journey back to Europe. So there was a lot of collaboration there. But one of the issues is, so we have the Spanish-American War, which the United States gets involved in because of an incident in Cuba, which is still under investigation. The United States sent a battleship out there to protect their interests, basically to protect the U.S. southern border, and it blew up. And the U.S. blamed Spain for it, and they used that as the catalyst for the reason to basically go to a war with Spain. And in the process, they ended up taking control of Puerto Rico and Cuba. Cuba was actually under United States rule for a little while. However, they never claimed it officially as their territory. and they let it go independent. There's a lot of talks as to why that happened. It's a bigger country. There's more people to revolt against United States rule. Puerto Rico was smaller. It had less people to revolt. But Puerto Rico became part of the United States, and the Puerto Ricans actually did not want that. They felt, this is around getting ready for World War II. They felt that they were just being part of the United States so that the United States can legally draft Puerto Ricans to participate in World War II. So Puerto Rico, as you can sense, has been overruled by other people for a long time. So protest and basically songs of protest become a part of the culture, and that's where bomba comes into play. So bomba was founded in Ponce, which is a city south of southern Puerto Rico, and the music has a rhythm that goes like this. Keep putting the wrong one. So the way the music is built is it's protesting. All the lyrics are kind of fighting against the establishment, and whatever they're at the time trying to get better rights in, right? On the flip side, we have a music that develops later you see it when Puerto Rico starts to gain some sort of sense of stability. It's called plena. And plena is a more festive kind of music. And plena, the lyrics are really interesting. They call it the newspaper music. So they would talk about what happened that week, who was dating who, and what, like scandalous thing happened, and blah, blah, blah. It was kind of like gossip music almost, And so that music has a rhythm that sounds like this. Keep doing that. So you can already see that's like definitely dance music, versus bomba can be kind of aggressive. It's already a little more serious, right? That music. So let's listen to a few things here. Let me see. Let's try. Let's see here. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Listen to this.
Dicen la negra Martina que brinca por los palacios, cayó dentro de una olla, de bandazo entre las mallas. De bandazo va ella, de bandazo, de bandazo anda ella, de bandazo. Ay, que de bandazo, la negra Martina cayó en la malla, de bandazo. De bandazo va ella, de bandazo anda ella, de bandazo. Se pasaba todo el día buscando palas.
That's scary music. Try to imagine you're like a Spaniard on patrol and the locals are playing this music, right? That's intimidating music, and it was meant to be intimidating music. Versus plena. So let's listen to some plena music. Give me a second here. Da, 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 da. Okay, let's try. Here we go.
Una vez yo llegué a la Yupi.
Okay, here we go. I want to find something a little more festive. Actually, let's talk about this music today, right? So, this music has pervaded pop culture for sure. Maybe not in obvious ways. In the jazz world, it totally has. Let me play you an example of some plena music played that you would hear now on a jazz scene. So this is Miguel Zenon. Come on, internet.
Esta plena me alegra el corazón. Esta plena me brinda satisfacción. Con el requinto y el seguidor. Y esta melodía hago la combinación.
Esta plena me alegra el corazón. Esta plena me brinda satisfacción. Con el requinto y el seguidor. Y esta melodía hago la combinación.
Me morí enterando algo yo. Y la canto aquí en Nueva York. Con el requinto y el seguidor. Y esta melodía hago la combinación. ¡Qué rica mi plena!
Esta plena me alegra el corazón. Esta plena me brinda satisfacción. Con el requinto y el seguidor. Y esta melodía hago la combinación.
Now we're in the present. So that's modern. that's jazz and plena combining now. Jazz has always been this sponge that sucks up the music of the time. So Miguel Zenon's from Puerto Rico, and he's really dedicated himself to mixing traditional Puerto Rican rhythms with jazz. So yeah, I'd love to get really into it, but let's keep going to other things because I want to scratch the surface on a lot of different areas here. So now we move to, let's see, we did Cuba, we got the danzón and the rumba. We've got, let me play you one Cuban thing real quick, which I think you would enjoy. So there's a dance called a gallo y gallina, the rooster and the hen. And it's a traditional Cuban dance where you have a male dancer who's got a red scarf in his hand, and you have a woman with a long dress that she holds up with her hands in front of her like a shield. And basically, the whole dance is the male dancer is supposed to be the rooster trying to impregnate the hen. So he's trying to hit her with the scarf, and she's using her scarf to block his scarf, right? And it's a really it's a fun thing, but that's where the style of dance comes into play. It's very like got sharp movements and stuff. It came from study. They actually witnessed roosters and hens. Let me pull up my rumba recording here. So okay, here we go. I'm gonna try to share my screen here. Hopefully it doesn't lag too much. Here we go. Okay. So really beautiful. So a good male dancer is going to try to distract with flashy moves and stuff like that so that he can strike with his scarf. And a really smart young lady is going to block the whole time. but that's a traditional dance part of Huahuancó. So that's the sound of rumba. It's a lot of drums. If you saw in that shot, there were 9 drums there played by 3 people. So they've already condensed it at this point because this is happening, now. But traditionally, that would be 9 people playing those 9 drums is how those rumba circles were. So I mentioned about the docks, and how they would have the darkest skinned people would basically be resigned to working on the docks, so that they were separate from society. So, and I mentioned about Spain would have these occasional strikes of instruments, right? So when that would happen, the Cubans would get creative. So there's a story that a strike happens, and there's a new shipment of slaves coming in from Africa, and they come in and they don't know the drill. It's brand new. Everything's brand new to them, and they come to the docks and they see these workers playing on boxes, on shipping boxes. So the Cubans discovered that a low box, like a big box, has a low sound, and a small box has a high sound. So they would make music with these boxes. So the shipment of slaves comes in. They witness this. The ship, does its repairs. They restock and everything, and then they head off to Peru, where these people, the legend is that these people fell in love with the sound of these boxes and decided to make their own, and they invented a thing called the cajon, which looks like this. This is a cajon. So it's a box that you sit on, and it makes some sounds. This instrument becomes the native instrument, the national instrument of Peru, the cajon. And so I want to take some time to talk about, because you may have heard Colombian music in the air through reggaeton and such, and salsa and everything, but you may not be familiar with the rhythms of Peru. So Peru has two main styles of music. We've got the festejo and lando. So festejo sounds like this. So it's a dance music. So it's played at night. It's played at parties. You may hear it really fast. It will sound like this. So it's very fun music. Let's listen to something from Festejo quickly. Let's see here. Let's see. It's my Festejo jam. Let's see. Here we go. So that's the sound of Festejo. I put on this playlist that I'm going to send you a video demonstrating the main rhythms. I can show you a quick picture here. I don't want to share because it's probably going to lag too much, but so these are the three main instruments of Festejo. We have the cajon in the middle. That guy sitting on it is a guy named Huevito. He's like a legendary cajon player. They call him Huevito because he looks like a little egg. And then there's the cajita. So caja is a box, cajita is a small box. It's a box that you wear with a strap, and it's got a lid, and he's holding a stick. So it makes three sounds. If the lid is closed, that's a muted sound that you would hit the shell of the cajita. If you open it and you hit it, it's got a different sound. It's a more open, lower pitch. And then when you slam the lid down, that's a third sound. And then what the guy's holding there, that is a jawbone. That is a jawbone of a donkey. And it's still got the teeth in it. So when you hit it, it rattles. And you can scrape the teeth, and it's almost like a huilo. So I'll play a little bit of this. Let's see. I'll play over here. You can see the sound of it all. that amazing? Amazing. So that's the basic ingredients for festejo. On the flip side, and I hope you're noticing this trend, there's music for parties and there's music for catharsis. That's a theme that happens, some more than others. Colombia, for example, has a lot of songs of catharsis because that country's been through a lot. They actually are called the land of 1,000 rhythms because there's supposedly 1,025 different folkloric rhythms coming out of Colombia, originating in Colombia. So Lando is a little different. Let me pull it up here. Lando. There we go. Okay, so while I'm pulling this up, I'm going to play for you. Yeah, I'll play this here. Okay. Okay, so, back to my cajon. So festejo was this. Very fun music. Lando is a little different. So here's Lando. Very different, right? So it's slower, and as you can imagine, it's going to have a little more of a darker theme to it. So here's the sound of Lando. Totally different sound, right? So I can go on and on and on forever, but are we running out of time? We can ask questions, we can, whatever you want to do.
I think we could take some questions for you, David. If anybody has any and they want to unmute themselves, they should feel free to do that and ask David a question. Or you could put it in the chat if you want.
Yeah.
Don't be shy.
I have a question about the cajita. What was that made out of?
So that's it's a wood. It's a wooden box.
Yeah. Because somehow in that trio, I kind of heard something that sounded a little metal, and I don't know what I was hearing.
Let's see. So there's a few sharp sounds that happen. So the cajon. The cajon is really popular in Peru, obviously, but also in Spain, there's an instrument in flamenco music that's a cajon, and that has snares built into it, which are these metal snares that give it that flam sound when I play like this. So that's a sharp sound. You might be hearing that, but the Peruvian one doesn't have snares. What it does is it's got these screws in the front, and they basically barely attach the lid, so it's loose. It's not really connected properly, so that when you hit it, they hit each other. So you hear a little bit of the metal there, but no, it's a wooden box and a wooden stick. Yep. The only metal on it is the hinge, but they don't hit that really.
Wow. This has been
Can you tell us a little bit about the tres?
The tres, yep. So I have a tres here. I can grab it.
That's what comes after the uno and the dos.
So this is a Cuban tres. It's called a tres because it has 6 strings like a regular guitar, like a Spanish guitar, but they group it into 3 groups of 2 strings. So these are 2 strings, these are 2 strings, and these are 2 strings. So I will just play a couple notes for you real quickly. So now 2 of the sets of strings are the same pitch, so it just amplifies it. For example, here's a cool fact for you guys. The piano, you guys know the piano? The actual name for the piano is the pianoforte, because there's an instrument before the pianoforte called the piano that could only play soft. And the innovation was, if you look inside a piano and there's all the strings, each key is hitting 3 strings. And that was an innovation. It was piano 3 times louder. So they did the same thing with the tres. So this is now twice as loud. And then the last one here is an octave. So it's 2 different notes there. And it's used, this instrument's very important because they would play something called a montuno on this. Arsenio Rodriguez was one of the main pioneers of playing this instrument. And pianists like Eddie Palmieri and, Charlie Palmieri and all those famous pianists, they actually learned that they learned guitar parts and put it on the piano. So we know montunos is happening on the piano, but it originated from the tres. So it's a very and then Puerto Rico has an instrument called the cuatro, which has 4 strings that are double sets as well. So it's actually 8 strings, and that one you can play more chords on it. You don't really play chords on this instrument. You play melodies and sort of repeating background figures, which we call montuno. I can't play this instrument. That's my retirement plan, is to learn this instrument. But I got.
Where comes the punto guajiro from?
From what? Say it again. Sorry.
The punto guajiro, where it comes from?
That I believe comes from inland Cuba. So inland Cuba had so something to understand about Cuba and colonization was the perimeter was heavily enforced by Spaniards, and there were people that couldn't escape the island, so they moved inland, and that's where son developed, and I believe that music developed there too. So they were kind of they were able to, they had a little privacy a little bit. We were able to develop that music there. But I don't know too much about that music. I need to learn more about that music.
And what about the maracas? Where they come from?
Maracas is there are maraca type instruments from Africa, like the shekere kind of has that sound, but Colombia is really known for pioneering the maracas.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. And that's why we see it in, so I don't have my maracas here. There was a sort of maraca that developed in Cuba, and then Colombia really ran with it. And they have a small maraca with a tiny little handle, and they have these very intricate techniques that they do. But there is a Cuban maraca as well.
Okay. The music from Ernesto Lecuona comes actually from African roots.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. I mean, everything has African roots. Everything. Yeah, I mean, even the music that made it to Western, like the music that we consider classical music, came from the Middle East and Eastern Africa. So Africa is the source of a lot of our music.
In Cuba and Puerto Rico, is there any indigenous input into the music?
Unfortunately, not too much, because the Tainos that were the native people there, a lot of them died off because of disease. So unfortunately, they were kind of replaced by the new slave population and Spaniards that came from Europe.
There's one question in the chat. It says, how does the music connect to the U.S.?
Great question. So that has to do with New Orleans. So New Orleans, there's a saying that New Orleans is Cuba's northernmost city. And that has to do with the relationship there. So that was the main port for the U.S. from getting supplies from the Caribbean. And that was a melting pot for all sorts of genres. But Cuba, for sure, was involved. Cuba and all the islands ended up in New Orleans. And that's where jazz originated, from influences from different genres. So yeah, it all comes in there. And R&B, like the clave pattern that we did, that's basic rock beats. It's actually in that pattern. So like the clave we were doing. You hear that in the Beatles. You hear that in Aerosmith. All sorts of things. It's a common boom ka boom ka do ta ka do ka ta. That's all clave. They don't know it. They're not thinking that's clave, but it's this thing that's been in the air, and it accidentally works its way into different genres.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the cajon?
Could I tell you more about the cajon?
Yeah, because I'm Peruvian and I grew up listening Lando and Festejo, but I always wondered how that cajon only make that sound, and it has a lot of rhythm and it's really nice.
It's amazing. Yeah. So it's made, so this one I have here is a Peruvian cajon. I try to get instruments from their source as often as I can. And so it's hollow. So it's got a hole in the back. And when you record it, you actually stick a microphone in there. And, and it's a very strong wood. And it's very resonant. And the technique, so if you notice, like, this doesn't really sound that big, but when you play it the right way, like, so you kind of have to have it in a certain position to get this big boom. You hear that now, right?
Yes.
And then the top of it, what I was trying to mention before, is it's got these screws on top. You can kind of see them a little bit. Like, that's a screw. These are all screws here. And those screws go around the whole front, but the top here is purposely left loose so that these two pieces of wood slap together, this front one and the edge here. So when you hit it hard enough, it's got it's almost like a snare drum marching band sound. So yeah, and I guess there's no substitute for creativity. These people were just so creative. So
amazing, yeah.
It is, and it's I love it. It's such a great sound.
Do you have a sample of Son Montuno to play?
Son Montuno, yes.
That's my favorite.
So let me see here. Let's try. This is the kind of sound of Son Montuno.
Como quiera.
So I want you to see something here. So we've got the bongo, right? We've got maracas in the guy in the aqua shirt there. We've got the huido, and we've got the clave, and in the back is the bass, and guitar is doing the montunos. But this is a portable band. This band can go run and hide with all their stuff. And they can go and do a gig somewhere, right? It's street music, you know? So son, yeah, I love son music. Son is typically uplifting. It's really hard to find like a serious song.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One more question in the chat. It says, do you know the tree or the wood for the clave in Cuba?
Ooh, I don't know the name of the tree.
Okay.
I can look that up.
Awesome.
But it's interesting, wood, and how it affects instruments. There's a wood that grows in Brazil that's great for clarinets. I have a clarinet here, and it only grows in Brazil. And it's very durable, and it's super resonant. And
isn't that caoba? Caoba?
That's one type, but this is it starts with an E. I forget the name of it. But you find that all over the place. I'll leave you with this. There's a drum. Let me show you a quick picture of this drum. Actually, I'll show you a little video of this drum. Where are you? Where's my thumb? Okay, here. So Colombia, Poro, has an instrument called the tambora. And I can find, let's see, give me 1 second. It's a really cool instrument, and what's cool is the wood. that's used in it. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Close. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay. So, do you see this? Let me share my screen here. Okay. Okay, so do you see that that drum that's sideways? That's a tambora. And what's unique about it is it's made from a tree that only grows in Colombia, and it's actually they chop a section of the tree out and they carve it out, and and all that's left is the rim. So it's not like other drums where they like glue pieces of wood together to form like a cylinder. It's one solid piece of wood. I've been trying to get one for years. They're so hard to bring into the country, and the Colombians that have it here don't want to share. But it's a really cool instrument, but it's a special wood that only grows there, and the way they make it is unique. Yep. So it's a fascinating world. This is all real stuff.
Could we hear a little bit of Cachao Historic Club?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
To hear a little bit of Cachao Historic Club.
Well, the first thing I played was Cachao. I love Cachao. Let's see here. Cachao. There's a great album called The Master Sessions. Let's see here. Let's go to. Let's see. Let's go here. Okay. So it's loading. Here we go. There it is. Oh, there. Sorry, come on. Oops. Sorry, my internet's mad at me. Here we go. Okay. No, not that one. Hold on. Oh, sorry. Here it is. Okay. Isn't that wonderful?
Very beautiful. Wow.
Master Sessions. I'll put it on this playlist so you can check it out. Cool.
One last thing. This is in the chat. How about patato and totico?
Oh my gosh! Now you want to get into congueros? That's a whole nother.
That'll be the next one.
Yeah, that's another class, right?
Cool. Yeah, I mean that's a big discussion. All those guys.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that was amazing, David.
Amazing.
I mean, amazing. I learned so much. I'm sure everybody else did here also. And I feel like we definitely could do another whole class. So let's think about it.
Yeah.
And we'll let everybody know. We'll send to everyone your playlist.
Great.
Yeah. And we can't thank you enough. I
Oh,
mean,
my pleasure. Yeah, and if you want me to focus on a certain country, let me know, and then I'll prepare for that, and we'll do it.
Awesome.
all right. All right. We will definitely be gathering feedback if anybody has ideas or, like you said, certain places he wants to highlight, but we all have our favorites. So cool. That's awesome. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
So much.
We learned a lot.
Thank you. This is great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Loved it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Be well. Cuídense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a good
Take
night.
care.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Night.
Bye. Thanks again, David.
Thank you, David.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.